Greetings, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the People's Power Hour in Lukman Nation. I am Jackie Lukman, the People's Prophetess, and welcome to another live episode of Lukman Nation. Really glad that you are here. Very, very important topic to get in tonight, even as there is other horrendous news that is being broken. I know the video of Tyree Nichols is being released soon, so I'm hoping that you're not watching that, and I'm hoping that this gives you something else to focus your attention on other than that. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you so very much. And as always, if you're watching on Black Power Media, you should be a subscriber to Black Power Media, shouldn't you? You should be. And if you're not, you need to fix that right now. Subscribe to Black Power Media. Make sure you click on the notification bell to be alerted anytime anybody uploads any content whatsoever on this platform. You can also support Black Power Media via Patreon, patreon.com/Black Power Media. You can also support Lukman Nation via Patreon, patreon.com/Lukman Nation, where you will receive the extended versions of the monologues that I publish. I get to have 7 to 8 minutes to say whatever the heck I want before the show on By Any Means Necessary 5 days a week. So you'll get a few of those extended monologues, a few videos, and I want to thank my patrons. I want to thank the patrons of Lukman Nation, because this lovely background is courtesy of you all, and this fantastic green screen effect. Yes, this upgrade was courtesy of Lukman Nation patrons. So thank you for your support. We appreciate you. I keep saying we. It's still me and Abdish. Y'all know that, right? Even though he's an ancestor now, it's still me and him. So let's get into this conversation tonight, because I did not want to have this conversation with someone who was not deeply connected to this struggle. And I appreciate that through comrades that I did not even know we were connected to, I was able to have someone come on the show who can give us some deep background on the situation in Swaziland and the most recent assassination of Thulani Maseko, who was a lawyer and a human rights activist. And I had tried to have Thulani on my show year before last, I think. But the weather was really bad in Swaziland, so we could never connect, and we never did get a chance to connect. But I wanted to talk to him about the situation with this brutal absolute monarchy, the last absolute monarchy on the continent of Africa. It is the regime of King Mswati III. So I'm glad that we are joined tonight. I'm hoping I think we've got a little technical issue. I'm hoping that he will be able to join in. Am joined. I will be joined by Velapi Mamba, who is uh, Swazi. He is Swazi. He was born in Swaziland. He's a human rights campaigner and political activist. He's also a trained teacher in development studies, and he's currently studying for his master's in public education at the Harvard Kennedy School. But we're not going to hold it against him. I mean, you know. So, while he's trying to reconnect, let's just talk about why we are doing this show um, right now, because this has been something that has been going on in Swaziland for quite some time. This is not the first political assassination that has happened in the country. Unfortunately, it may not be the last if King Mswati is not removed in some way, and it doesn't look like he is going to go willingly because he has not thus far. But People's Dispatch did a very detailed article about the assassination of Thulani Maseko, and they say that his assassination has killed the prospects of peaceful struggle in Swaziland. And they some things that I highlighted in this article, and let me see if I can expand this a little bit for you so you can read it a little better. The person interviewed by People's Dispatch said that by killing Comrade Thulani, the king has killed any possibility and prospect for the continuation of the peaceful method, because for us, he has demonstrated that the employment of peaceful methods means we're inviting death for ourselves. There comes a time in the life of every nation when these choices have to be made. And he's talking about Swaziland making having that choice that they are having to make right now. And this is Velpi texting me. So I hope we can get him on. Tell him to please come back in. Sorry about that little technical issue. But you know how it goes when we start talking about things that are important, that are happening on the continent to us, that are connected to capitalism and imperialism. You know how it goes. All this stuff is not it's not by accident, certainly not a coincidence. Certainly not a coincidence. So let's see. Who was Thulani Maseko? He had been imprisoned several times by the king for wanting to run opposition parties against him. King Mswati III does not allow elections, really, unless he chooses the people, the candidates that the people can vote for. There are no opposition political parties that can run against King Mswati. Um, as you can see, and as we're going to hear a little bit more about, he is certainly not above killing people who have the audacity to publicly oppose him, which is what he did to Thulani and many others before him. Oh, excuse me. And I think we have Velapi back. Velapi, can you hear me?
Hi, Jackie. Yes, I can hear you. But
Oh,
I have a document before me, so I don't know whether you
yes.
are okay.
Yes,
here.
that's a screen I'm sharing. So let me remove it. Everybody, this is Velapi Mamba. As I said, he is Swazi. He was born in Swaziland. He is a human rights campaigner and political activist, trained teacher in development studies, and is currently at Harvard Kennedy School uh, studying for his master's in public education. Velapi, thank you so much for joining us to talk about the crisis in Swaziland that the assassination of Thulani Maseko has caused. So, first, I would like for us to know who Thulani Maseko was, beyond being a victim of another victim of King Maseko in Mswati. Who was Thulani? Why was he targeted by the king?
Thank you very much, Jackie, and a good evening to you and your viewers on this platform. And thank you for making it available for us this evening. Let me start off by saying that, first of all, expressing my condolences to Thulani's wife, Comrade Daniel, and his children. And also to say that Thulani Maseko to me was a friend, a personal friend, a brother, and a comrade of many years. And many struggles have been fought in the front lines of human rights defense together with him, inside and outside Swaziland. And I take this time to dip my revolutionary banner in his honor. Coming back to your question, I think Thulani Maseko's brutal assassination, because there is nowhere, there is nothing else in which we can frame his killing other than calling it what it is, a very, blood-curdling, murderous act that has been visited upon him, has been long in the making, because Swaziland has been simmering under a state of war and conflict that has kind of heightened since June 2021, when the king unleashed his security forces, in particular the military, to butcher and slaughter unarmed citizens all over the country, merely because they had stood up to demand democratic reforms. So I want the killing of Comrade Thulani Maseko to be understood and situated in that context, a context where Thulani has emerged historically as the voice of the voiceless, and a relentless, indefatigable, a pillar of the Swazi struggle. You'll recall that Thulani dies at a time where he was the chairperson of the Multi-Stakeholder Forum, which is the coalition of the progressive forces, both inside and outside Swaziland, that are calling for a peaceful democratic transition in Swaziland. I want your viewers and everyone else to understand that at the heart of the Swazi question lies the taking away of the dignity of the Swazi people in terms of their ability to self-determination. And this happened as way back as 1973, after the colonial struggles that were fought by our forefathers, where the king, the father to the current king, unilaterally abrogated the National Independence Constitution and created a state of emergency, and banned political formations, banned human rights and freedoms, and basically created a unitary state where power is centered around him and his family. As a consequence of that, even as the nation demanded for a new constitution, the 2005 so-called new constitution we have that was sponsored by the Commonwealth did nothing to assuage the demands of the people for the right to form their own government on the basis of the majority of Swazi citizens and to allow political parties to be able to campaign freely in the country and form a government that will deliver on the social contract. Because what we are seeing in Swaziland is a huge breakdown of the social contract between the governed and those that are in authority. And this is largely because the people find no space to actually organize themselves in their political parties or political groupings in order to pursue their political aspirations and ambitions. So in Swaziland, you can organize in every other sector apart from in the political space. So whether you want to do microfinance, whether you want to do agriculture, whether you want to pursue any other enterprise, you are allowed to do that as groups, except for when it comes to political matters. So where we are today is largely a function of that history and the total failure of the 2005 constitution. And Swazis over the years have been campaigning vociferously within the country and externally to continue to call for the immediate restoration of the right to form their own government. And the crisis we are in today is as a consequence of all the systems and institutions of state collapsing because of the overarching and unfettered powers of the monarch as an institution, but also the monarch as a king. And therefore, the decimation of those structures in terms of the rule of law, in terms of the executive and the legislature, the fact that everything is congregated around one person has bred significant levels of poverty, unemployment, corruption, and a total erosion of the rights that Swazis naturally should be enjoying, because there is no scrutiny in terms of the extent to which public resources can be used in furtherance of the social contract and social policy obligations. So this is where we are. And Thulani Maseko has been an illustrious, towering figure that has been verbalizing the suffering of the Swazi people. Thulani Maseko has been the one who has been going to court to stand on behalf of students that are being victimized by the government. He is the one that has stood for the landless who are being evicted from their communities and from their lands. He is the one that has gone to the court to even challenge the king himself when in 2019 he woke up and unilaterally changed the name of the country from Swaziland to Eswatini. So Thulani Maseko was really a very fearless legal scholar and eagle who was really ahead of his time in terms of understanding the very nature of the Swazi struggle and what is at the heart of what people want right now in Swaziland, which is getting back their country, a country that was taken from them by coup d'etat, basically by the royal family. So that's what lies at the heart of the problems in Swaziland. A disenfranchised nation, an island of dictatorship in a sea of democracies. So Swaziland is the only country in Southern Africa right now that still bans political freedoms, political parties. It's the only country right now that doesn't have, community radio stations, that controls access to information. And all, kind of information outlets are controlled by the state. If it were not for the internet and the arrival into the scene of online news outlets such as Swaziland News and others, Swaziland would probably not be where we are today. So this is the situation right now. And I strongly believe that Thulani Maseko was silenced because of his unwavering belief in the fact that the time for the Tinkhundla system of governance, which is the obtaining status quo in Swaziland, currently is over. He was convinced, like the rest of us, that it is time to move the country towards a national political dialogue that is externally mediated, that will lead the country to its first democratic elections since colonial times. This is what Thulani stood for, and this is what he was killed for. At the time of his killing, he was actually in conversations with the chairperson of the Troika, the SADC Troika organ, that's responsible for security and peace in the Southern Africa region, precisely because he wanted to steer the country towards a genuine national political dialogue where all stakeholders can sit and begin to craft and reimagine a new future for the country.
Wow, that is an amazing background that led us to the horrendous assassination of Thulani Maseko and what the Swazi people are fighting against. And you mentioned the king and his regime in comparison to the level of poverty that the people in Swaziland live in. And by the way, because this despot arbitrarily renamed the country from Swaziland to Eswatini, I do not call it Eswatini. I call it Swaziland because that's one of the things that Thulani Maseko was fighting against. He went to court to say that the king arbitrarily changing the country's name was unconstitutional and should not have been done. So I will honor the Swazi people and not call it what this despot decides he wants to call it. But you know, there have been stories in Western press, particularly like The Guardian, a UK publication, about the wealth and Australian publications about the obscene wealth of the king, King Mswati III, and his, I can't remember how many wives it is, I think it's 15, and the luxury that they live in, absolute obscene luxury. But how do the people in Swaziland live compared to how the king and his extended family lives in the country? Valapi.
Thank you, Jackie. I should start by saying that until his very last breath, Comrade Thulani insisted, like the rest of us, in calling Swaziland Swaziland. I think that the name change of the country from Swaziland to Eswatini is the single most powerful metaphor of the extent and scope of the king's unfettered powers in Swaziland. He is practically a man no one can rein in. He holds unlimited power in Swaziland to the extent that right now nobody can challenge him. His word is final. He's above the constitution. So he's a proper absolute monarch. I should also say that the death of Thulani Maseko comes at a time where we've seen an escalation of assassinations of pro-democratic forces in the country across the board. I mean, Thulani right now is the third person to die in a space of less than three weeks or a month. Comrade Muzi Mema recently died, 2 weeks ago. Comrade Mlandvo Khumalo was also shot and killed about a week ago, and now Comrade Thulani has also been killed. But this is also in the backdrop of numerous under extrajudicial killings that have been taking place over the course of the past decade or 2 decades. So that situation, that context is very important. And in terms of now the question, the lages that the king is living in, I mean, his extravagance. You will recall that in 2019 and 2020, there was an uproar in Swaziland when the king purchased about 20 Rolls Royces, like almost the single largest purchase of Rolls Royces by an African in modern times. He currently now owns 2 executive jets for his exclusive use in a country where 63% of the 1.2 million people in the country living in extreme poverty. So the extreme levels of wealth for him and his family. I mean, if you go onto Facebook, there's a page called Swazi Royal Leeches that really just exposes the extravagance and the sheer, use of public funds for personal aggrandizement. A lot of that is spent on lavish palaces, on wristwatches, on cars, on vehicles, and a lot of other vanity kind of exercises like going to Vegas for gambling and shopping over sprees and all these things. Now, all these expenditure patterns have actually had a very huge knock-on effect on the extent to which the Swazi state can discharge its social obligations to education, to health, to access to food and food security, to maintaining and building a robust road network, and making sure that there are scholarships for children in universities and other social needs. This is why I was saying that there has been a breakdown in the social contract. The king is rated as one of the richest monarchs in the world. Forbes magazine currently estimates him to be around 200 million US dollars. But beyond that, the full control that he has in all the economic industries and sectors in the country, whether it be retail, whether it be construction, security, whether it's been it is the telecommunications, mining, all these industries are firmly in his and his family's control. Right now, the country, for example, is mining coal, is mining gold and diamonds, chat, and other minerals. And nobody knows where those minerals, the proceeds of those minerals go. Nobody knows where the royalties that are due from the companies that are mining those minerals go. So all those go at the end of the day into his personal pocket. And Swazis have decided that enough is enough. There has emerged now a generation that says our state must come back to our hands. We must have our own elected government that can listen to us, that can discharge its obligations towards us in terms of the social contract and other obligations of the state.
Now, you mentioned mining operations, and we were talking about all this money that the king is keeping for himself and his family. And I just want to be clear, the issue is not that the man has 15 wives. The issue is that he's stealing money from the people of Swaziland that should go to take care of the people of Swaziland. But he is doing what he is doing instead and enriching himself and his family. So here's my next question, and I think is a question that everyone is probably asking now that you have said that there are mining operations that are mining gold and diamonds and other materials. What are the capitalist interests that are helping to keep King Mswati in power? Are there capitalist Western backed interests that are keeping him in power? And if there are, what are they? Who are they?
Thank you, Jackie. The geopolitics of Swaziland are very complicated. As with any other African country, there are indeed interests, and the interest in Swaziland cannot be limited only to Western interests. I think you will understand that, broadly speaking, there is a renewed kind of push to recolonize Africa. If you look at the various, interest from both established developed countries, as well as the emergent economies such as China, India, and others. So the interests insofar as Africa is concerned are very clear for everyone to see. And from a Pan-Africanist perspective, I believe that as Africans, we should be really, really taking a serious look at how we respond and react in a unified way towards that. Now, in relation to Swaziland, like I've said, it's a very complicated set of geopolitics. On the one hand of the spectrum, you've got countries like the United States, or the countries that I would call the so-called democracies. These would include countries in the European Union, the United States, the UK, even if I don't know whether to call that a democracy, but with all its problems. But the traditional bloc of the traditional bloc of so-called democracies, including the ones I've mentioned, including Israel, also in that stable, as well as Taiwan. All these countries, have got a clear interest in Swaziland. So if you look, for example, at where we are getting our military support, it comes from the US. Some of our guns and our intelligence comes from Israel, and then from Taiwan, and most recently Russia, as well as some strong links with the United Arab Emirates. So there's that gamut or spectrum of interests insofar as Swaziland is concerned, and all these interests are indeed endorsing and working with King Mswati for various reasons. Economically, we produce our sugar, our forestry, our minerals, and export to some of these countries. Our sugar, for example, goes to Europe, and our beef and all that. And then we've got a huge textile industry that is controlled by Taiwan, and a lot of factories owned by Taiwanese that are paying meager salaries to our people and entrenching and advancing poverty and unemployment. So that's one block of countries. And then, of course, we have the African countries with their own interests. Here we have South Africa, which really is should be a country at the core in terms of leading the change process in Swaziland. We have support from the African National Congress, but we haven't seen much support in strong terms in terms of the South African government itself, aligning with itself with the cause of the Swazi people and helping them to attain freedom. Especially in light of the historical role that Swaziland played in ending apartheid. So South Africa has its own interests in Swaziland. A huge 90% of our imports in the country come from South Africa. Our budget support, just recently, it has been, reported that we've received the historically highest levels of support from the Southern African Customs Union, which is called SACU, which really provides the mainstay or the key contribution to our national budget and our national fiscals, meaning that the South African economy, in a sense, is linked to the Swazi economy like Siamese twins. And therefore, South Africa is really a key determinant in terms of what happens in Swaziland. A lot of our retail, our business interests are actually rooted in South Africa. Pick n Pay, ShopRite, and our oil and gas supplying companies and all that are actually in South Africa. And the SACU system, in terms of the tariffs and the formula for trade and benefiting from that, is linked to that system. And then you have Mozambique. Mozambique currently is at war. You know that there is a war in northern Mozambique. And but Mozambique also has interests in terms of what happens in Swaziland. So all those interests should be looked at very strongly. Now, I would imagine that in my view that the global interest in terms of the US and other powers is, of course, for many different reasons besides the economic reasons. I mean, for countries like the US, for example, they would want to make sure that Swaziland as a buffer state should remain stable, given the often tumultuous political environment in South Africa itself. Right now with load shedding, for example, and the July also uprising in South Africa itself in 2021. So all those dynamics are at play. Everyone wants to make sure that should South Africa sink, there should be a buffer state that's available for them. Then we look at China, right? And China has an interest in getting Taiwan out of Swaziland, because Swaziland is the only state currently in Africa that has formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. And this doesn't please China. So there is that diplomatic tightrope and interest as well to look at in terms of the geopolitics of Swaziland. So if you look at the visit this week by the Russian Foreign Affairs Minister, for example, you will recognize that there is a loaded interpretation that must be gleaned from that visit. Because we know that Russia and China are also in a strategic kind of alliance in terms of being dominant, emergent superpowers, and making sure that they balance off the powers of the US as an imperial, global power. So that is at play in Swaziland, and there's the huge likelihood that we might see a proxy kind of war play itself within the borders of Swaziland at the current moment.
Where in the world do I start? So you mentioned, let me start with AFRICOM, because AFRICOM is practically everywhere on the continent, although the United States likes to pretend as if it's not. And because you said that Swaziland gets weapons from the US, this leads me to believe that AFRICOM has a footprint in Swaziland. Is that accurate?
Well, I'm not too familiar about AFRICOM and its operations, so that's not something that I can confirm. I would imagine that there would be other people who can authoritatively speak about that. But what I do know is that there is some cooperation going on between the United States government and the Swazi government insofar as our army is concerned, whether it's with regards to training or it's with regards to weapons and all those things. So there is that kind of agreement in place between the two countries.
Yeah, that's Africa. we definitely recognize the United States coordinating training of foreign militaries on the continent. That is an expansion of AFRICOM. So the other thing you mentioned was Taiwan and the very close relationship that the king has with Taiwan, and does not have with China. As a matter of fact, I think Swaziland is the only country on the continent that has not signed on to the Belt and Road Initiative. And I can't help but think about the king's relationship with Taiwan in the context of the king's relationship with the United States and the aid it gets also from Israel. I mean, that's all tied together to me. And is it?
Yeah, that's why I was saying that our geopolitics are quite complex, and I think they need to be looked at in a very in a way that recognizes those complexities. There has to be some kind of fine balancing act, because indeed, I mean, right now, our geopolitics have kind of shifted in the sense that we are seeing Russia sending a very high-level official, its foreign affairs minister, to Swaziland for the first time in a, in history, if not for a very long time. And this is very significant. Like I said, Russia and China should be understood, to be in some kind of strategic relationship, especially also as members of BRICS and the BRICS formation. And India as well is very big and huge in Swaziland. Actually, right now, there is a very controversial project costing 1.5 billion rands of a loan that India has given to Swaziland to construct a new parliament building, which is very controversial. So just from a geopolitical perspective, then you can see that there are these emergent alliances that are playing themselves out within the geographic borders of Swaziland. And it remains to be seen what those will lead to. But clearly, China, in a sense, is upping its game, in my view, through this Russia connection, in terms of trying to kind of edge Taiwan out of the equation. But this is difficult now for the Americans because, as you know, the Americans have an interest with Taiwan, and it's also difficult for Mswati himself because the relationship he enjoys with Taiwan, is a historical relationship started in 1968. So it's unimaginable how he would navigate his way out of that relationship with Taiwan. So in a sense, the stakes are very high, one should say, from a diplomatic vantage point. I think they are also very high for us as the progressive forces in the country, because straddling and understanding these interests is very important. And I often say that what is most important, however, is our interests as Swazis. What are our interests? And that is what we should pursue. And in my view, our interests are to have a functioning nation state based on the values of freedom, on the values of democracy, and the values of self-determination, and a government that can be responsive to the needs of the people and deliver on the social contract. As to how then we calibrate that really depends on how we come together and be united as a people and make sure that we end the totalitarian rule that we are currently under right now. And I should emphasize that this is our generational mission, to end absolute rule in Swaziland. We need to make sure that the Swazi people stand together, but also allies who support the cause for democracy are able to assist us in the process.
And that's exactly why I'm so glad you were able to come here and talk to us about what is going on. One last question. This is a really, as if this man's regime couldn't be any worse. What is his connection to apartheid South Africa era members of the military?
Who, the king?
Yes.
So maybe let me first just explain that the current political system we have in Swaziland is actually a kind of anachronism from the past. It was engineered and designed on the advice of apartheid functionaries in the apartheid administration. It's almost similar to apartheid in the sense that it is a system that places a premium on royal supremacy. So where in apartheid you saw a black on white oppression, as Thulani Maseko would say, with Tinkundla you see a black on black oppression that is being peddled on the basis of royalty and commoner, where the ordinary Swazi is seen as part of the commoner class, and the stratification of the classes in society place the royal family at the apex of Swazi existence. That is why even today, if you go to Swaziland, there is not a single statue of an ordinary person in Swaziland. All the statues, just from that historical perspective we have, are statues of royalty, because the guiding permissive environment is being defined as one that places the ownership of the country squarely in the hands of royalty. So that's one thing that I think people need to understand. And then there is the romanticization where, there's the nostalgia about the Africa of the past, a traditional Africa, an Africa that still retains its traditions and culture and values, which the king and his functionaries are using as the kind of a system from which they draw their legitimacy and through which they manufacture state power. So coming back to the question of the apartheid system, the whole Tinkundla philosophy was drawn from that calibration. And now what we have seen is that at the height of the push for democracy, the royal family has once again remembered that apartheid could probably save them. And they have brought into the country, as you have seen, former apartheid operatives who are being, called military experts that have been drawn into the country to assist on security questions, when in actual fact, these are racists who are driven by hatred and who are driven by capitalistic intentions to preserve the status quo and make sure that Swazis continue to be oppressed by this regime. So it's very clear to us that apartheid is still alive through these white mercenaries that are in the country. And in fact, hardly 3 or 4 hours after the king threatened that those mercenaries would deal with pro-democracy activists, Comrade Thulani Maseko was shot and killed, which is why we have no doubt in our minds as to where the originations of his killing actually are at the current moment.
You have the last word, Valapi. What do you want to leave people with? How can people be in solidarity and support the people of Swaziland? What organizations can they check into? What do you want? What is the last thing you want to leave people with from this conversation? Because this will not be the last conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jackie. I think solidarity is the most important principle in the world. And that is what we need. We need people to write to their governments about the Swazi question. We need these kinds of platforms so that we can allow more Swazi voices to be amplified in explaining what is going on in Swaziland. We need practical support for all the people who are going out of the country into exile, who are running away with their families, the widows, like Thulani Maseko's wife right now, who suddenly has no husband to feed her, whose children will now have to grow out without a father, who will need to continue to go to school. So we do need practical support for all those people who are actually running out of the country in their droves, in particular people in the progressive camp. We need the regional institutions to investigate independently the killing of Comrade Thulani Maseko and all the other killings that have taken place in the country, including the June 2021 massacre, which to this day there has been no accountability. Because without accountability for all those killings, there is not going to be peace in the country. We need political leaders, the elders of the African continent, to go to Swaziland and begin to speak to the authorities of the country, to begin to facilitate a genuine political dialogue, a properly a mediated political dialogue that will have political objectives, that will have clear political outcomes, that will move the country forward without, window dressing the problems that we currently have. That's the kind of solidarity in practical terms that we need. So institutions like the United Nations, institutions like the SADC, they must stop their lip service. They must be firm with King Mswati. King Mswati will never yield state power on a silver platter. They must understand that. So what we need is, we need leaders that will be firm with him. I should say that as way back as the time of President Nelson Mandela, there were already initiatives to try and kind of engage Swaziland into the direction of transitioning into a democracy. All those over the years have failed very dismally, because the leaders of the SADC and the leaders of the African continent have abandoned the African people. I am saying today that it is time to remember those 1.2 million Swazis. It is time to restore their dignity. It is time to recognize that there are widows in Swaziland, there are amputees in Swaziland, there are impoverished people in Swaziland as a result of the conflict that is taking place there. We have a compassionate responsibility and an empathy, an obligation to show some empathy to what is taking place to the people of Swaziland. And I am requesting the world, I am requesting everyone who has means to get in touch with us to assist those families, and also to move the country to the next level of engagement, so that the political crisis that we are facing can be resolved in a sustainable and enduring way that is sustainable and that allows us to be on the path to democratic reform and peace.
And how can people get in touch with you, Valapi?
People can get in touch with me. I think you have my number here. I'm reluctant to tell that online.
I'm not going to give people your number. I'm not going to do that. No.
But people can look me up on Facebook. I'm Velapi Mamba, and on Twitter I'm at Black Mamba V, and I can link them up to the Multi-Stakeholder Forum and other progressive organizations that are leading the struggle for reforms and change in Swaziland. I need to emphasize that we are at a point of no return. Swaziland cannot go back to where it was. The time for the current political system known as Tingundla is over. Swazis must begin to look forward to a new political dispensation where their dignity as a people will be respected, and where their needs as a people will be provided for by a government of their own choosing. This is the path that we are on now, and it is the path for which, if necessary, we will pay the price that Comrade Thulani has paid. This is what we want to say. There is no going back. So please do look me up, and let's have a conversation, and we will indeed align and direct you to our leaders back home in Swaziland, so that you can assist wherever you can. But most importantly, all those people who are in the centers of power, where it matters globally, we need you to work with us. We need you to be firm on making sure that Swaziland doesn't slip back or doesn't slip into a worse political situation and a war, a civil war that clearly is brewing right now.
Valapi Mambo, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time, and your insight. This will not be the last time you all in Lukman Nation see and hear from him, and it will not be the last time we have a conversation about geopolitics and the situation in Swaziland, as Valapi and I have already talked about continuing this conversation with some women leaders in Swaziland to talk about some of the gender issues that are going on there. So stay tuned. Thank you so much, comrade. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, comrade. We appreciate it, and have a good evening to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, y'all. That was fantastic. I love interviews where I learn stuff. I hope people don't think that I just know all the things. I do not. I love bringing people on who enrich me, and I certainly was. So please reach out to this brother on Facebook and on Twitter. I think he said it's Black Mamba 3. I'll get his Twitter handle, and if somebody's found it already, drop it in the chat so people can connect with him, so we can connect with people. We are planning to have some women leaders from Swaziland, like I said, come and talk about the gender struggles in the country. So I'm really, really looking forward to that. And I really hope that you all were enlightened tonight. Swaziland is a small country that most people couldn't even find it on a map, but it is incredibly important to so many geopolitical powers for different reasons, for whatever their reasons are. But as an anti-imperialist, and as a Pan-Africanist, I always believe that whatever the empire is interested in having a foothold in, whatever country, the US empire, which is the hegemon in the world right now, whatever country the United States and its allies are interested in having a foothold in, we better be interested in finding out what they're doing there and how it's affecting our brothers and sisters on the continent. So thank y'all so much for joining me. It was a great show. Appreciate you very much. You should be getting ready for Burn It Down with Kim Brown at 7. And I believe History as a Weapon with Sundiata Chajua at 8 p.m. here on this platform. So y'all be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. As always, a luta continua. The struggle continues, but I promise you, Victoria certa. Victory is certain. Peace. Oh, don't watch that snuff video. Don't watch it. Don't do that to yourselves.